Hey guys, I'm Heidi Priebe. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time here. On this channel, we talk about how to get more of what we want out of our lives and our relationships with both ourselves and other people, and less of what we don't want. And today, I want to talk about a concept that I've had kind of rattling around in the back of my mind for the past almost decade now. So when I was doing my undergraduate degree in psychology, I took a particular class on building healthy relationships, and at one point during a lecture that he was giving, the professor of the class, whose name was Dr. Carl Hennig, dropped this line that was something along the lines of most people stay in bad situations or bad relationships because they can't tell the difference between growing pain and pain. And I remember writing that line down and I never forgot it. And over the years, I would kind of continuously return to that question and ask myself what it meant. What is the difference between growing pain, so pain that expands you, and pain that is healthy and moves you towards what you want in life, versus what he called pain, or what I came to call shrinking pain as my own internal representation of it. And that kind of pain I sort of intuited was the kind of pain that makes your life smaller and more contained and doesn't grow you in any significant way. And over the years, as I returned to the question of how to differentiate between these two pains, I eventually landed on the definition of this that I'm going to be using in this video today. So growing pain is pain that aligns you with reality. So pain that gives you true information about which choices you ought to be making based on how you truly feel. Shrinking pain, or what my professor would have called pain, is the pain of resisting reality. So the pain of trying to do anything but see the truth. And in my opinion, that type of pain, the pain of resisting what is real and true in our lives, is the kind of pain that shrinks our souls down over the course of our lives and shuts us off from the people that we could become. Versus growing pain, the pain of accepting what is true and honest and actually happening in our lives, as well as our true, honest reactions to what's happening in our lives, is the kind of pain that might hurt in the short term, kind of like having a really tough workout does, but in the long term aligns us with reality, which includes our true potential and the positive impact that we could make on ourselves and the world and other people, and continuously opens us up to new perspectives and new opportunities, because reality and our feelings and thoughts and relationship with reality, if we are paying attention, is always changing and always offering us new doors to walk through. So for the rest of this video, what I want to focus on is distinguishing between growing and shrinking pain, because figuring out which one you're experiencing is the difference between, let's say, going to the gym, pushing through the soreness, and then getting stronger, versus going to the gym, getting an injury, and continuing to work out on that injury, which is likely going to end up in harming yourself in some significant way that's difficult to recover from. And the same goes for emotional or psychological or spiritual pain. There's the pain of pushing past the difficulty and awkwardness and insecurity of trying something new in order to grow into a stronger, more robust version of ourselves. And then there's the pain of engaging with something that only harms, shrinks, and diminishes us the longer we persist and continue to engage with it in the same way. So just to put things in slightly more concrete terms off the bat, some examples of what it might mean to resist reality might be something like refusing to accept when something that once made us happy, or something that we once had a lot of hope about, whether that's a relationship, a job, a certain way of approaching our lives and ourselves and other people, is no longer panning out for us. Maybe this thing was once very compatible, or we hoped it would be in the future, but the more we try it on, the less it works for us. We're trying to force ourselves to be happy with something that we once thought would make us happy permanently. So this might result in us kind of putting our blinders on and refusing to look at what actually is in favor of how we wish something were. And a counterexample of accepting reality and living in alignment with it means being willing to feel the tough emotions that come along with realizing that we are in the wrong situation, or we are approaching something in a way that isn't working, or we are in a relationship or a career or some sort of habit or routine that we were really hoping would be the answer to something, but isn't. And being willing to sit with the grief of that and the reality of what is, even if it's not the way that we hoped it would be, is what it means to live in alignment with our present reality. And from that present reality also flows a ton of new beautiful opportunities that we may never have realized if we were staying fixated on the world that we wanted to see, rather than the world as it is. But without further ado, we will go into 5 ways that you can tell whether the pain you're experiencing is the pain of growth and aligning yourself with reality, or the pain of shrinking and denying reality, as well as why it's important to actively seek out that pain that ends up growing us. So, distinction number 1, you're probably experiencing shrinking pain if the longer that you engage with a particular situation, again, whether that's a relationship, a goal, whatever it is, the more it hurts and starts kind of diminishing your life force. So depleting your energy, depleting your ability to come up with new ideas, to tackle things creatively, to figure out what might work to get you through something, as opposed to growing pain. Growing pain, the longer you engage with it, the stronger you get. And the reason that happens is because when the pain you're experiencing is growing you, because you're aligning with what's actually happening and the opportunities that are truly in front of you in real time, it offers you the opportunity to upskill, to gain new ways of doing things more effectively, and to put those things to use. So growing pain is the pain of your skill set being challenged, but ultimately solidifying and expanding so that the longer you engage with a given thing, the stronger and more capable you feel. So you might notice that challenges that you used to struggle with are starting to feel easy for you, and now you're able to take on more complex challenges. Versus with shrinking pain, you're likely to feel more and more burnt out the longer you engage with a particular challenge. Because when we are resisting reality, when we're trying to force the past onto the present or whatever it is, we are getting increasingly disconnected from our energy and our life force and our sense of self. Because in order to be the most vital and engaged and alive versions of ourselves, we have to be orienting ourselves to which resources exist for us in the present moment. So emotionally, socially, intellectually, what are we able to draw into our world from the environment that we're actually in, and how do we nourish ourselves with that stuff? If we are engaged and paying attention, we will find those resources whenever they come along. But if we're resisting reality because there's something we don't want to accept about our circumstances, we're also going to be resisting the nourishment that we could be getting out of reality. And so we're going to feel more and more depleted the longer we engage with whatever it is that we're trying to push into existence. So shrinking pain feels like burnout over a long period of time, whereas growing pain feels like a sense of strengthening and developing our way towards new challenges and new opportunities. So again, if you want to know what kind of pain you're experiencing in a relationship, in a job, whatever it is, look at whether your skill set, your sense of energy and vitality and curiosity is increasing as time goes on, or whether it's decreasing and you're feeling less aligned with new opportunities and perspectives rather than more. Distinction number 2 between whether the pain you're experiencing is growing or shrinking pain is how much you have to work to make it make sense. So when we are experiencing shrinking pain and we're denying some aspect of our reality that we don't want to face, often what happens is we have to intellectually jump through a lot of hoops in order to make something make sense. So in order to justify a given relationship, a given move we want to make, a given approach to tackling a problem, we have to kind of think and think and think, and often we can find ourselves thinking in circles and consistently arriving back at the same place we started at, because the key, the thing that's actually going to make everything make sense, requires us to be in reality and accept the truth for what it is. So if there's something about my life that is true that I just don't want to be true, let's say I hate the career path I've chosen, but I don't want that to be true because it's giving me so much validation in the eyes of my family, and I want to feel worthy and admired in their eyes. If my brain is refusing to let me see that because it's too threatening, I'm going to have to constantly jump through hoops to explain to myself why I'm not happy, even though I have everything that I claim I want out of my life. I'm going to have to make up 1,000 elaborate theories to explain that. Versus growing pain, the pain of acknowledging what is true, which could include things like, I don't want this thing that I wish I wanted, right? Growing pain means we're aligning ourselves with what is, and so there's not a lot of confusion about what's going on. Even if it's sad to accept the truth as it is, it's usually fairly straightforward to understand reality when we're looking at it accurately. when we're not trying to defensively exclude things that we don't want to be true from our awareness. So we don't have to think too hard, we don't have to analyze or prepare too hard for conversations when we're living in reality, because the only things we really have to be paying attention to in order to make decisions is what's happening and what do I feel in relation to that. So what's happening in my career? And how do I actually feel about it? Do I really wish that I liked doing this for a living, but actually I kind of don't? That's all the information I need to know. There's a quote I absolutely adore from a woman named Regina Thomashauer that goes, "There is freedom when you know that you're playing your only card." And I kind of think of living in alignment with our true feelings as exactly that. We are continuously playing the only card we have, because there's only ever really one truth. But there's 1,000 possible variations or manipulations or slight adjustments we can make to the truth inside of our own mind. So when we are experiencing shrinking pain, often what we're doing is like rooting through this entire deck of cards, trying to find the right combination that is going to most closely resemble a life that might work for us, when in reality, we know that it's not that complicated. There's one card in that deck that is the trump card every single time, and that card is the truth. And the reason why there is so much freedom in playing the truth card is because you don't have to think that hard about it, because you aren't trying to control all of these things and force reality to be different than what it is. All you're doing is aligning yourself with it and then letting whatever happens next happen. And that may be painful in a lot of circumstances, but that's the kind of pain that ultimately opens you up to new opportunities, because now that you've been honest about who you are and what you want out of life, you're free to start exploring avenues for getting that and aligning yourself with new opportunities that are going to go down a lot more smoothly than the ones that you are trying to convince yourself you want when that's not really true. Distinction number 3 between growing and shrinking pain. When the pain we're going through in life is shrinking us and it's keeping us increasingly disconnected from reality and the truth and our own authentic experience of reality, what we end up doing anytime we feel a sense of joy or contentment is clinging to it at absolutely any cost, and or desperately trying to recreate it over and over and over, because any joy or contentment we experience is kind of a happy accident. When we are denying who we are, what we want out of life, what's important to us, and we're living out of alignment with our own true wants, needs, and values, what we're likely to be doing is creating a life for ourselves where a lot of the life is miserable because it's not a true reflection of us. So when, by some happy accident, joy comes along, there can be this sense of panic because we don't know how to recreate that joy intentionally. We know that we are not driving down a road that's going to naturally produce more of that. Versus when we are experiencing growing pain, it's a lot easier to use discernment about when to indulge in happiness and joy and contentment, because we know that we are driving down a road where those feelings are going to naturally get spontaneously recreated over and over, because the choices that we're making for our lives are aligning us with the type of future that we actually want. So when we are resisting reality, happiness and joy feels very scarce because we know that we kind of found it by accident. Versus when we are embracing reality, there's a sense of abundance and relaxation around positive feelings, because we know that we've been able to use our discernment about what matters to us in life to design an overall experience of living that is increasingly right for us and aligned with what we want, and that over time perpetuates more and more joy and happiness and alignment. So we don't have to panic and grasp onto joy every time we feel it. We can let ourselves experience it lightly and let it go when it wants to leave, because we know without a shadow of a doubt that that's going to come back, based on the type of life that we are designing for ourselves from the inside out. Fourth distinction between shrinking and growing pain. Shrinking pain, or the pain of resisting reality, keeps you connected to your shoulds in life. So if you are not able to actually tune in and get clear on what you want out of your life and what really matters to you, the only way you're going to be able to make choices is to design kind of a list of things that you think you should do, or a list of things you think you should want, or a list of rules that you've internalized from society or your friends or your family members, and to try to guide your behavior based on those shoulds. Now, the problem with shoulds is that they aren't particularly flexible. There's nothing wrong with having general principles for how we want to live, but in order to know when it's time to adhere to a given should, and when it's time to recognize that we're in a slightly different situation and we need to adjust for context, we need to be in touch with how we actually feel. If we are not in touch with how we feel, we're going to use our shoulds to guide all of our behavior. And when we're doing that, a lot of what we end up doing consistently can feel like a huge sacrifice. Because if we are not tuned in to where our energy is naturally flowing out of and towards in the world, we're not going to be aware of what we want to pursue in life. And then over time, our entire lives become this kind of labor of obligation instead of a labor of love. Right? We're always thinking about what we should want, what we should be doing, what we should be forcing ourselves to be disciplined about. And in the process, we might just be making ourselves increasingly depressed because we haven't actually checked in a while and noticed whether the things we're